We're going through a lot right now, aren't we? This summer is like no other I can remember. Starting with the tornadoes that wreak such havoc in the lives of so many, the horrific shootings in the Oregon district, and even closer to the heart of our Catholic community, the appalling tragedy of 8 days ago when the McBrides and Jaskos lost two precious little girls in a senseless accident that defies comprehension. The outpouring of love, prayers, and support for the families has also been like nothing else I can remember. See how they love each other is both a very ancient and very fitting description of how the community has responded to this tragedy. The love shown to the McBrides and Jaskos is what Christian communities were famous for during the time of the early church. And I can personally attest to the love of this community and have experienced the power of your intercession to God on my behalf and that of my family, to which I am very grateful. So, it is with great confidence and faith that I ask you to redouble your prayers for 2-year-old Benny Jasko, that God's healing touch will enable him to leave the intensive care unit where he has been since the accident. When you add these tragedies to those that others are facing, just as devastating, but perhaps not as widely known or perhaps not known at all, there's just a lot to deal with right now, a lot to process, a lot to pray for. In a very real way, we're in a crucible of sorts, aren't we? Job's situation from the Old Testament is not unlike what our community has suffered recently. Take a minute this week and read the beginning of the book of Job, and I think you will find the similarity striking. For his part, Job's emotions ranged from anger, numbness, sorrow, grief, and despondency. Yet, the Bible said in all this, Job did not sin. This provides us some consolation, for our emotions too can vary widely, often within the course of just a few minutes. I think we need to acknowledge these emotions, whatever they may be, for they bring forth a stark and even harsh clarity about what we fundamentally believe about God and our faith. But we must also acknowledge that our emotions are not in any way the basis of our faith and hope in God. Our emotions are like the shifting sand that Jesus warned us against building our house on. The foundation of our faith, the bedrock on which our hope rests, cannot be in something as fickle as how we feel. Our faith and hope must be grounded in truth, the way, the truth, and the life, our Lord Jesus Christ. For it was for times like these that our Lord came to walk with us and help us bear the crosses of life. Being human, our emotions will always be part of that. You know, the image of Jesus as perennially serene and even unaffected by what was going on around him is a peculiar fantasy some have about our Lord. I call it the so-called gentle Jesus fantasy. If you actually read the Gospels, such an image is refuted in almost any chapter you care to read from. I find it peculiar in that some hold on to this notion anyway. It's a fantasy because the exact opposite is true. Our Lord was not perpetually serene and unaffected. On the contrary, he was a very passionate man. He experienced anger, grief, sorrow, and pain, as well as joy, happiness, and great pleasure. He was particularly fond of his friends and fellowship and was delighted when he saw acts of kindness and love. And of course, he was gentle. A bruised reed he would not break. But he also railed against and was enraged by hypocrisy. Our Lord was like us in all things but sin. But unlike Jesus' passions, ours are not well ordered. Our Lord's passions, his emotions served him, were at his command, whereas with us, due to original sin, more often than not, it's the other way around. All too often, we're slaves to our emotions, and while I expect you won't disagree with me, I would also expect you might be asking why the psychological analysis tonight. There are two reasons. The first is, many times our emotions and passions reveal assumptions we have about God that may be unstated, or we may even be unaware of ourselves until we examine those emotions and passions. For example, we may be angry at God because of what has happened to us or to someone else who is so good, so faithful, so innocent. I won't pretend that I have an answer. Why that happens is a mystery no solution has been adequately come up with, even though it's been debated through the ages. Many explanations have been offered. None seem to make a difference in the midst of the suffering. Our faith does tell us, however, that all things work for good for those who love him. That is something we can hold on to. And I would note that our Lord, who is himself the highest good, the most faithful, and the most innocent, also suffered the most at the hands of evil men. And the greatest possible good came from that, our salvation. The second reason I bring up our emotions and passions is so that we might use them as God originally intended. Before the fall, our passions and emotions were always directed at helping us to achieve the good. They served us, not we them. They provided motivation, power, and desire. They turbocharged our virtues like a shot of adrenaline, if you will. They enabled us to achieve the good that we were seeking. And our faith teaches us that even now, grace can sanctify and baptize our emotions and passions, bring them into submission to our Lord so that they can serve us and the kingdom by empowering us and energizing us to ever deeper acts of love. Love is how Jesus responded to every situation in his life. That's how he wants us to respond when things get tough, like they are now. He wants us to respond in love. And we don't have to deny our feelings. We don't have to pretend we're not angry, confused, or questioning what kind of world is this where such things happen. But our faith does call us to sanctify and baptize those feelings and so transform and transfigure them into acts of love. The Bible tells us that where sin abounds, grace abounds all the more. And if I may make a contribution along those same lines, I would say sin adds, but grace multiplies. We are witnesses of these things. See how we love each other.